This is the Tree of Life, Season 31, Chapter 3. In this episode, we will be juxtaposing how synchronicity arises distinctly under tautological recursion and under multiple structures hierarchically. When there are two structures with reversed priority hierarchically, we see that stacked perceptual experiences become contiguous perceptions centered around some common object. This object is the object of synchronicity. The result of the collapsing of these two structures is that person A becomes both the incoming and outgoing consciousness, according to impulse 2, corresponding to the object of synchronicity, which arises out of the second structure where person B is higher in priority. This means that linear continuity in the experiences of person A is intruded upon by affirmation of an impulse which is distinct from that they intended, or which would have been the product of the structure where they were higher in hierarchical priority. Under tautology, linear continuity is created through each tautological cycle, as the leader, person A, becomes the incoming consciousness for person B, and each subsequent person down the line, until the cycle is complete and the final person, person Z, let's say, substitutes for A. But part and parcel of this is that the substitution of Z for A recognizes that A has already substituted in B, and B in C, and so on and so forth. Thus, on the balance, after the dialectical degeneration, person A is actually the incoming consciousness for person A at the conclusion of the tautological cycle. However, unlike the above plurality of structures, under hierarchy producing a shift of intrusive impulse into the continuity of A, under tautology, we see the extrusion of the original impulse. From this we can see that narrative, described in the last episode, arranges structures in priority with the storyteller higher in priority. Telling a story as a medium, unlike sublimation, arranges the listener in a parallel structure lower in priority, such that they become the incoming consciousness. The effect of this, when there is already a duplicate reversed orientation structure, is synchronicity, or linear continuity, in the actions of the lower in priority. However, unlike narrative, tautological recursion still permits stacking of perceptual experiences. In this case, we aren't talking about contiguous perceptions centered around some common object, but rather, the linking of disparate experiences analogously by virtue of a common impulse. So the synchronicity, which manifests from tautological recursion, is an extrusion of the impulse within the tautological cycle to those outside the tautological cycle. It is this which causes the consensus shift we observe through digital media. We can also show that reciprocal affirmation of impulses by turn as between two persons in two digital structures can generate nonlinear intersections within substitution events. When they are out of phase, the result is infinite recursion favoring one person or the other depending on the phase. So, in this example, in structure 1, person A is hierarchically the outgoing consciousness and person B is the incoming. Person A affirms impulse 1 for person B and negates impulse not 1. In structure 2, person B is hierarchically the outgoing consciousness and person A the incoming. Person B affirms impulse 1 for person A and negates impulse not 1. When these two structures are out of phase, that is, when person A affirms impulse 1 and negates impulse not 1, and person B affirms impulse not 1 and negates impulse 1, person B experiences infinite recursion pursuant to reverse substitution with negation at the conclusion of the event. This results in a nonlinear intersection between person A and person B within recursion at the location of A. In other words, bonds of affection on turn-based platforms can generate nonlinear intersections on a cycle created by hierarchical recursion and reciprocal affirmation. In other words, turn-based reciprocal affirmation represents non-locality in hierarchical priority. That's the end of the podcast for today.